Healthcare is a Human Right, Washington. It's on May 31st. Camilla Jayapal is going to give a video reading. It's at 5 p.m. at the Washington State Labor Council, and I think it'll also be online. And it'll talk about, quote, victories and lessons learned from this year's Washington legislative session. And, there were several priorities that healthcare as a human right was pushing, and some of them got passed. Wednesday, June 5th at 5 p.m., there's a PSARA webinar on pulling back the curtain, lies, fraud, and naked profiteering in Medicare privatization schemes. And it's going to have Wendall Potter be the main person who's giving the webinar there. So we'd love to have lots of turnout for that, because it should be, a very important topic. And Wendall Potter's, known all over the world, if not the United States, if not the world, for being the whistleblower on how bad health insurance is. And now, Gerri Haynes is an inspiring example of someone who at numerous times has put her life on the line to live her values and help others. I've gotten to know her a little bit, and she's certainly an interesting, feisty person and a grandmother at this point. But along those 30 or 40 years, she's been working with WPSR. She's been a mother, grandmother, not a daughter though, right? She's past president of Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility and has served on WPSR and national PSARA boards. Her first trip to the Middle East included a brief visit to Gaza, where she became aware of the barriers experienced by her colleagues struggling to meet the needs of the Palestinian people. And since 1993, she has been organizing WPSR groups to the Middle East, including visits to Israel, Palestine, Iraq, Jordan, and Syria. And altogether, she has organized 35 trips for medical groups. Can you imagine that? Gerri holds a Bachelor of Science in Nursing and completed her master's work in medical ethics. She has worked as a clinical nurse, administrator, and clinical manager of healthcare construction for intensive care, family maternity care, hospice, and palliative care. And for more than 30 years, she has facilitated a support group for mothers who have experienced the death of a child. And this work is reflected in her work in Gaza. So let's give this feisty grandmother a big round of applause. So turn it over to you.
Oh, feisty, that's funny. My family would agree with you, I think. Thank you. What an interesting group. Hey, Joel, thank you for working with WPSR on this stuff. I think you're doing a great job. So I'm going to talk tonight about healthcare in Gaza under the siege. Have any of you been to Gaza? No. Okay. Gaza is a hard place to get into. Right now, I've been working for 2 months trying to get us in October, and the Israelis are not responding very much because they have a lot going on in Israel right now, including a 5-day time last week where there was bombing and rocketing and a lot of problems. So I'm still hoping that they will respond to me and we'll get to take a group of medical professionals back into Gaza in October. I'm going to show you just a little short video my husband put together after one of our trips in 2014. Got it? Gaza rests on the shore of the beautiful Mediterranean Sea. To the south is Egypt, whose border with Gaza is nearly always closed. To the east, west, and north, Gaza is imprisoned by Israel. Entrance and exit to Gaza is strictly maintained, and permission to enter from Israel is difficult to obtain. A series of checkpoints and barrier doors on the Israeli side lead to a paved walkway in Gaza, perhaps 1/2 mile long. On either side of the walkway, the armed wall is visible. Along the road leading from the crossing into Gaza are signs of desolation and destruction. What was once living space and agricultural land has been cleared by Israel, purportedly for security reasons.
Entering the northern reaches of Gaza, roadways pass through recent scenes of war's destruction. In the distance, entire villages have been destroyed. Damaged residences continue to shelter families who have nowhere else to go. The beautiful port of Gaza was home to deep water fishers. Israel now restricts the sea border of Gaza to a narrow strip of shallow water. Israeli gunboats patrol the sea and routinely fire on fishing boats that near the boundary. Potentially toxic remnants of destroyed buildings are becoming part of the seawall, areas where families gather.
But it's important to know that getting in there and making that long walk, there's now a golf cart that takes you down. The last time we were there was in 2020. We had to leave because of COVID. So again, we're trying to get in October, but there wasn't a whole lot of difference. That film was made in 2014, and pretty much the devastation still exists all along the walkway in. And people who used to live there were sent to other places to live, and there weren't any other places to live. So poverty is a huge issue in Gaza. I'm going to show you some slides. Looking at this sort of gives you an idea of where we're talking about. The picture on the left shows you all of Israel and surrounded by Egypt and Jordan and Syria and Lebanon. And if you think about from the standpoint of Israel, that they are in fact all surrounded by Arab lands, you can feel that perhaps they are not eager to open up their boundaries. However, the part that's Gaza, can you see this little piece right down here? That's the Gaza Strip. And the Gaza Strip is about 25 miles long. On the picture on the right, you will see the whole of the Gaza Strip, and it's about 25 miles long and 3.5 to 7 miles wide. The pink area that you see outlined is what's called the no-go zone. The no-go zone takes up about 30% of the arable land in Gaza, which adds to their very great nutritional problem because they used to be able to farm there and now they can't. If you have questions anywhere along the way, please just interrupt me, okay?
Well, which part is the no-go zone, the pink part?
The pink part. There used to be a number of crossings to get into Gaza, but that's no longer true. There's one down in Rafah, which goes to Egypt. There's one right below the one that says Rafah, that's Kerem Shalom. Kerem Shalom is where the goods come through. And then, I don't know if you can see the top of this or not, but there's one that comes directly from Israel. The part I'm showing you right now, you can still see Gaza with the outline in orange, and then hopefully the rest of it will appear. There's the sea border, and in the sea border, the Israelis put gunboats out there, and the fishing is greatly restricted, generally speaking, to about a 3 nautical mile limit off the coast, sometimes rarely to a 6 nautical mile, but the whole area is difficult for the fishermen because if they venture out of whether it's a 3 mile or a 6 mile, they get fired on. And in the many times that we've been in Gaza, we've never been there that there wasn't either a drone attack or a bomb or firing from the sea or firing from the wall. There's always the danger of being fired on. So people go to the beach, but they go to the beach with some trepidation because it's not safe. on many, many days. You'll see the note down there that says there's a presence of a natural gas field off the coast of Gaza, and that's been something that the Israelis have wanted to claim for a long time. And now there seems to be some kind of an agreement with Egypt, but the people of Gaza could probably make a pretty good living if they had access to the money from that natural gas field, but they're not going to have that in anytime soon. This all making sense? All right, so you go in at the top at the Erez checkpoint through that walkway that was in the video, and you go into Gaza, and you have to ask for permission from the Israelis and permission from the Palestinian Authority and permission from Hamas, and then you get to go in. And our sponsor is always and has been always the Gaza Community Mental Health Program. The Gaza Community Mental Health Program was started in 1991 by a wonderful man, a psychiatrist named HCHRWA, who became our very, very good friend. He came here to visit us. We went there to visit him. We went to Mexico to an IPPNW meeting together, and then he died. And so now the leader of the Gaza Community Mental Health Program is another psychiatrist, lovely man named Yasser Jamai, and called GCMHP, the Gaza Community Mental Health Program. They are the agency that sets up all of the work that we do in Gaza. They arrange for our taxi cabs, they arrange for our cell phones, they arrange for meeting with all of the medical people that we hope to meet with. And our physicians then serve in hospitals and clinics. And we have, in the last few years, also taken in with us some alternative health people who teach yoga and teach exercise to women in the women's health clinics, and that's been very popular. It's impossible for us to ask for permission to enter Gaza with someone who is not a medical person, because just tourism is not possible in Gaza. Any comments? Okay, and let me just go back a little bit. In 2000, Gaza is populated over 50% by refugees, people who are the relatives of people who were excused from the West Bank in either 1948 or 1967. So there are more than half of the population of Gaza is comprised of refugees. And those people are under the care of UNRWA, United Nations Relief Works Association Agency. And UNRWA is funded partially by countries all over the world, Qatar being a high funder. The United States was a high funder until the Trump administration, when $300 million were taken away from them. And now some of that has been returned, but they run schools and medical clinics and mental health facilities and are always overburdened with the amount of work that there is to do. After Oslo, there were negotiations between Israel and Gaza, and in 2005, the approximately 5,000 settlers who had moved into Gaza were removed. And then after that, there was an election, and Hamas, who was known then as the Party of Peace and Freedom, was elected, and the Palestinian Authority wasn't happy about that. So there was a brief skirmish between those two agencies. And finally, there was some kind of peace so that Hamas rules Gaza, and the Palestinian Authority has agency over the West Bank, but they also assist with some of the people in Gaza. The fracas last week was started by the Islamic Jihad, and Hamas stayed out of that because they're really trying to not have another explosion of lots and lots of war. At any rate, the siege that then went into place in 2007, 2008 has remained in place for about 16 years. And that means that the people in Gaza who used to make wooden furniture and grow fruits and vegetables and export them into Israel, and many thousands of people who worked in Israel went through the border and now no longer can, although there's a buildup a little bit of that. All of those people are destitute, and the rate of unemployment is somewhere, depending on age, between 48 and 67%. It's a very big problem because the level of poverty, of course, is very high. Because all of the goods that come in to Gaza have to come through the Israeli checkpoint down at Kerem Shalom. Many individual agencies help to provide those goods, but all of those goods come through Israel, and most of them are purchased in Israel. So there is some discrepancy in the way that people view the goods coming in, because there are people in Gaza who would rather not receive those goods because Israel is profiting from them, and yet they really can't live without them. So there's a lot of just thorny discrimination or thorny feeling about how people get their food, how people get their supplies. And for physicians working in the hospitals, there are 30 hospitals and major clinics in Gaza. And for physicians working in those hospitals, they often have to wait for protracted periods of time to receive the equipment they need. One year we were in Gaza and they actually had received some X-ray equipment, but they had been denied completion of an elevator, and so they couldn't get the X-ray equipment to where they needed it. So it was just sitting vacated down in their basement. And just things that feel so unnecessary and cruel happen on a daily basis. Now, in those last 5 days, last week, when they were in conflict, for instance, the World Health Organization reported that they had truckfuls of supplies that needed to get in, but because all the crossings were closed, they were not able to get in. So that meant 5 days without the regular supply of food or the regular supply of medicines. It was just at a standstill. People who, there are 2 medical schools in Gaza. Both provide what looks to be a very good education. Many of those young physicians would like to come out of Gaza and get further training, either in Europe or in the United States, but getting permission to come out of Gaza to get further training is very difficult to get. And there are times when people actually get permission, but then there's an extended wait for the permission crossing to be granted. And so the possibility of the course that they were going to take just goes away. They don't get to go after all. This is true of people who are very, very ill in Gaza and need treatment outside the strip. They need to go out for chemotherapy or some further kind of surgery, something that's essential to their good medical care. And they will maybe get permission to go out and maybe not get permission to go out. If it's a baby and the baby has young parents, the young parents are typically not allowed to go out because there's an age limit on how old you have to be before you are allowed to leave Gaza. I hear every day from a young man who worked as a falafel vendor, and his mother right now has cancer, and she was due to go out and be seen on the 14th in Israel for her chemotherapy. And he wrote to me in a complete panic during that 5-day period last week, because he was afraid she wasn't going to get to go. Today, I got a note from him with great joy. He told me that she was able to get out, but he's not allowed to go with her because he's only about 30 years old. And people that are about 30 years old are viewed by Israel as being potentially dangerous. So typically they can't. And I've been at the crossing to see a 10-month-old baby with her grandmother taking her across the crossing because her mother wasn't allowed to go because her mother was too young. It's a very strange way of caring for people, and yet about probably 45% of the people who need to cross and get better medical care eventually do that. Sometimes they go to Egypt, but that's a long stretch to get through Egypt down to medical care. And the better way to do it is either to go out through Israel and into an Israeli hospital, or through Israel and into the West Bank to Jerusalem. In Gaza, there are some wonderful heroes. This picture was taken at a cerebral palsy center. You'll see kids here in wheelchairs or funny devices. They actually do square dancing in this school in their wheelchairs. And this place is run by a man who has a halo on his head, makes these kids smile and feel as though they're loved and cared for. And there are wonderful places in Gaza where people have worked their whole lives to make sure that the children know that they're loved. There's a woman in Gaza named Reem Abu Jaber who, again, during the fighting last week, wrote to me and said, sent me pictures of explosions. And I said to Reem, how close are you to these explosions? And she said, about a 2-minute walk. But Reem has made an old monastery into a library for children and 4 or 5 different children's centers. She's a saint. And she refuses to enter into any kind of political discussion because she fears that it will take her away from what she needs to do, which is continue to take care of children. This is one of the groups at Reem's place where they just try to teach these kids to be resilient. And so we go with by ourselves through WPSR to offer medical care. We try to offer teaching and consultation. And the young man here on the right, it was a urologist who is no longer alive, but he went a number of times into Gaza and did a fantastic job of teaching. And this man that looks kind of like Bernie Sanders is my husband. He's a retired cardiologist, and he still goes in and teaches advanced cardiac life support. They love that we come there, that we try to bring medicines for the Gaza Community Mental Health Program. When we go, we try to support the people who are working in the women's clinics and the children's clinics at Gaza Community Mental Health. But we take in specialists from anyone who will go, from neurosurgery to trauma surgery to a pediatrician that goes with us and has located a group of kids with autism, and he has worked and taught and formed groups of people taking care of people with autism. But there is a problem because water, raw and partially untreated sewage flows right straight into the Mediterranean. There, the soil is polluted with chlorides and nitrates. And as I told you earlier, 30% of it is not usable because it's in the no-go zone or the security zone. There's lead pollution that has terrible effects on children. The whole population is 65% or more food insecure. And when they block the sea, they have lack of access to fish protein. They have limited electricity. Tell you a little bit more about that. And there's no security, so their mental health is always at risk. And all over Gaza, there are explosive remnants of war. And you'll see kids going into places where things have been blown up and they're picking up those remnants. I spent a fair amount of time in Iraq with remnants that were exploded with depleted uranium. And we know that there has been DU in Gaza. It's a sickening feeling to see those kids pick up those remnants. This little girl is typical of about 15% of the kids in Gaza who have chronic malnutrition. And if you go into a home, you'll see a child like this who should have very dark black hair and has a redheaded look to her because it's a sign of chronic malnutrition. This is a picture of the sewage flowing right into the sea. There are places where you drive along the ocean in the Sea of Gaza and the aroma of the sewage is just horrendous because they don't have sewage treatment plants that are sufficient to take care of their needs. This is where their water used to come at a place called Wadi Gaza that flowed through Israel and down into the sea, but that water has been rerouted and is used in Israel. So now the water that's available to Gaza comes from an offshore aquifer, and that offshore aquifer is also polluted. And they had hoped to get more water for use, but have not been very successful at doing that because their saline treatment plants have not been very successful. So the water that they have is extremely polluted. It has cholera, it has Shigella, it has all kinds of things in it, and you just can't drink it. 96.2% of it is non-potable. So they bring in bottled water from Israel, and then they find sometimes that even the bottled water is polluted. Water is a terrible problem in Gaza. And the generators use leaded gas and they produce things with lead, and so lead poisoning is also a problem for the children of Gaza. The destruction, this was a hospital, and they were warned that it was going to be destroyed. And so all the patients were removed, and then the hospital was destroyed. But the feeling of having a rehabilitation hospital completely leveled was really hard for the people in Gaza. They really grieved this event. And you see these kids playing on the rubble, dangerous rubble. We were told that this is where this child used to live. So we went into one of the Gaza clinics, and we were told that they had a group of children draw pictures, anything they wanted to draw. And so here are two of the pictures that we found on their wall. Dead kids lying on the grass of Gaza, bombs coming down from airplanes. So the mental health is a real problem. Know that if you have a child who never can sleep without thinking that maybe there will be bombed during the night, and children will say, I've been in the clinics and children will say, what if they bomb us tonight? What will we do? And you're the parent of such a child. And what do you say? Mother that told me this story after the child left said, what I say to him is, come and crawl into the bed with me. I'll take care of you as well as I can. But I can't ever say to him, you're guaranteed to be all right, because there is no guarantee. of being all right. I like this little story. It was a chilly, overcast day when an Arabic, supposed to say Arab horseman, spied a little sparrow lying on its back in the middle of the road. Reining in its mount, the horseman looked down and inquired, "Why are you lying upside down like that?" And the little bird says, "I heard the sky was going to fall today." And the horseman laughs and says, "I suppose you think your spindly legs can hold up the heavens." And the sparrow replies, "One does what one can." I'd love to have questions. Before I went to Iraq the first time, I listened to Ramsey Clark say to us at a WPSR dinner that what we were doing to Iraq with the sanctions was killing people. And he wanted us to make the sanctions as bad as any kind of bombing that we might be doing elsewhere. And at the end of his lecture that night, Ramsey Clark said, "Thank you for all that you do. I only ask that you do more. And I know that all of you are doing more, and I'm grateful."
Tell us about the border from Egypt. Can the Palestinians get any medical supplies? You mentioned that it's a long way for a Palestinian to get to a healthcare facility in Egypt, but do the Egyptians have the same border restrictions that the Israelis put on the Palestinians? What can you comment on the Egyptian border?
Yeah, the Egyptian border, Rafah, is sometimes closed, often closed, and the restrictions of going in and out are pretty stiff. You can apply, and if you have, there's usually a bribe that's involved in getting to go through Rafah, but people do get to go through Rafah and on down to Cairo. It takes a day or so, and long trip in a car. And then even when you get to Cairo, you're not sure that you're going to get the medical care that you've been promised. So it's not looked upon as the best way to go. But indeed, if we take someone with us who has an Arab name, that's how they get in, is through Rafah, because they can't get in through the other way. So it's sort of a clue to us about who can get in and who can't get in. I have a good friend who comes here to see us. He's a psychologist a PhD psychologist from Gaza, and he just went back into Gaza through Rafah. It took him 2.5 days to get there. So it's not easy. It's possible, but it's not easy. Used to be tunnels that were under the border, and we could even go into the tunnels. Sometimes it was a little spooky, but they brought in lots and lots of material through those tunnels, and those have been almost totally closed now.
Thank you. You're blowing my mind tonight. Who's your best advocate in the House and best advocate in the Senate? And what committee has power over the situation?
Well, I'd like to find that committee, Margaret, but when Jim McDermott was in Congress, he went in with us, and he was terrific about going in. Since he's not now, our best advocate is Maria Cantwell. So Maria, when we're stumbling along trying to get in, Maria will get hold of the Israeli embassy for us, and she's been 100%. So I'm really, really grateful to her.
Great.
Thank you.
Has the United Nations had resolutions that were put out there to help Gaza that were stymied by the US, not voting or voting against it or something like that, similar to resolutions against Cuba for Cuba that have been, turned down by the United States and Israel and things like that?
There have been resolutions, David. The most recent, very more public thing that came out was from the World Health Organizations with some of their partner organization. And they wrote that they were calling for an immediate end to the blockade of the Gaza Strip and the arbitrary delay and denial of permits for Palestinian patients in need of essential care and ensure unhindered access for patients and their companions. We mentioned that. And the arbitrary delay and detention of ambulances and healthcare staff at checkpoints and the arbitrary arrest of healthcare workers, and ensure that Palestinian healthcare providers can work unobstructed through the occupied Palestinian territory, facilitate entry of all essential medicines and medical supplies, including on and on, things that they believe should happen for the people of Palestine by removing so many of the restrictions. Gaza is known as the world's largest open-air prison. It is probably the third most populated little bit of land on the planet Earth. People are smushed together, and there are some wealthy people in Gaza, but again, the rate of poverty is around 65%. So when you have a 35-year-old son who wants to marry and can't marry because he can't have a job, the restrictions are horrendous. If they could get out of Gaza and work, or if they could farm and sell their things out into Israel as they used to be able to do, it would change their lives. But that's just not happening.
So what happens to the United Nations resolutions?
Pretty much go unattended from my perspective. Israel is not a fan of the United Nations. Do you know that?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So the United Nations may say this or that, and Israel pretty much says, you know, they're not going to pay any attention to that. But I'm going to go back and say, Israel lives in a very tight enclave. And if you haven't read Daniel Sokatch is the head of the New Israel Fund, and he's written a really wonderful book called Can We Talk About Israel? Worth a read. Absolutely worth a read. There are always two ways to look at these things. One of our closest allies is an American Jewish woman who runs an organization called Gisha. Gisha tries to get people through the crossing, tries to open the crossing, tries to make sure that people are safe in the crossing. And that's a 100% work all the time organization based in Tel Aviv. So there are people in Israel and people in Gaza and in the West Bank who are trying so hard to create peace in this crucible of the earth. And they're continuously wishing things would get better.
Healthcare resources are definitely a problem in Gaza, as you experienced. Well, I'm just wondering what kind of system Hamas has put together as far as a national healthcare approach to their problem. And I realize that there's all kinds of social determinants of healthcare in Gaza that are probably more important, but does Hamas have any kind of working system to provide healthcare to their population?
Well, I would say that they have periodic systems that they've tried really hard to put together systems. They're still trying to figure out on a daily basis how they're going to work with the Palestinian Authority. You know, Hamas started in the West Bank many years ago as a humanitarian organization. They've been really spoken very badly of since they took over the governance of Gaza. I've sat in a number of meetings with the fellow Ismail Zamila, who used to be the head of the Gaza Hamas, and he's been moved out now to a higher job, but always in the meetings with him, he was kind and respectful and talked very solidly about wanting to get things organized, but that there were lots and lots of barriers. So I can't tell you that there's a very well-honed program. I know they work on it.
Well, who owns the hospitals there and the clinics?
There's an Indonesian hospital, there's a hospital run by the Palestinian Authority and same thing with the clinics, that some of them are run by the PA, a lot of them are run by UNRWA. Qatar has a hospital that they opened in 2015 to treat the need for prosthetics, and that came in really handy during the Great March of Return, when a lot of kids were hit below the knee and their legs were damaged. So that it's a wide spectrum of who owns them, who runs them, who supports them, and a lot of support comes from the outside, from Mercy Corps, from the ICRC, from the Red Cross, from Doctors Without Borders. There's a huge amount of support that comes in to Gaza from many organizations, and some of that money runs through UNRWA, some of it runs to the Palestinian Authority, some of it runs through Hamas.
If there's anything hopeful on the horizon, or is it just all pretty grim?
Well, Howard Zinn said you have to always have hope. I believe that. I believe you always have to have hope. And there are a lot of people, Mustafa Barghouti, who runs the Palestinian Medical Relief in the West Bank and goes into Gaza, is always hopeful that things are going to get better. And, you know, Abbas, who is the head of the Palestinian Authority now, is old and wealthy, and probably one of these days will be replaced, and we'll just hope and pray that he is replaced by someone who has more finesse. You know, we watched Yitzhak Rabin die at the hands of a very, very right-wing Israeli, and Yitzhak Rabin was right on the verge of a peace settlement. So we just have to keep hoping that that will happen. I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's impossible. I think it's still possible that we find the hearts and souls of those people who have a high enough intellect to put this together with integrity. I'm hopeful. I love going there. The people are so amazing. I have a friend who works at Gaza Community Mental Health, and his wife is also a psychologist, and her famous quote is, "We are coping, but not adapting." Adapting means that we accept the way things are and we adapt to them. Coping means that we are coping because we're strong and we have hope.
What I was wondering, what role Egypt can play here? Is Egypt just kind of a bystander, and they're not like trying to interfere with the Israeli occupation, or what? I mean, is there any pressure on the Egyptians to help out somehow?
Well, Egypt does try to help. Egypt is, you know, Israel is the receiver of most. Israel receives more foreign aid than any other country from the United States, and Egypt is number 2. And there is a lot of political pressure on Egypt, such as there was last week, to find a way to stop that gunfire. So it's hard to know that Egypt is a singular strong voice, because there's so many political ties tied to the money. Yeah. I'm a little, that's a little bit of cynicism. I apologize for it.
Well, what I'm getting at is this blockade is it seems like it's a dual blockade from Egypt and from Israel. Is there any kind of pressure on Egypt to ease up that blockade? I mean, why? In other words, it seems, I don't know that much about it, but it seems to me that they could, if there wasn't only a blockade from one side, and then you can get all this goods and medical care and nutrition from the other crossing or, it just seems like, why isn't that getting any attention?
Well, okay, so let me say this again, there's a lot of political money pressure involved in that. Because if Israel is the second largest receiver of US foreign aid, you have to follow that thought that Egypt is going to be the recipient of a fair amount of pressure not to go against Israel and open the gate. Now, Rafah is open more now than it was maybe 5 years ago, but Rafah is not always open. And again, it's hard to get through. And everyone I know who's gone there recently has had to pay a bribe to get through. Maybe that's not true of everyone, but that's the story that I hear. So Egypt is looking out for Egypt right now. And I apologize for the cynicism of that, but they are in cahoots with Israel about how to make things function. And my understanding is that it's Egypt who has made some kind of a bargain on this about that natural gas pipeline, that natural gas field. So I don't know that. I'm speaking out of turn about that. But Egypt is under a lot of economic pressure from the United States to make sure that Israel isn't alone in the siege. Now, why can't they open the gates, relieve the siege, make this whole thing a more humane process? There are all kinds of reasons, of course, but we can hope that will happen.
You mentioned that
Yeah.
you were looking to put together a group to go in October, I think you said.
Yes.
Typically, how big are these groups, and does every member of the group have to have an active current medical license of some type?
No, everybody has to be medical. Everyone that practices medicine while they're there has to have an active license. You can go and teach or consult without a license. The groups, I guess the largest group that we took in was 26, but more likely 12 to 14 people. And we stay anywhere from 7 to 14 days. Everyone pays their own way. If you pay your own way and you save the receipts, then you can submit that to if you're a member of WPSR, you can submit that to WPSR as a tax deductible donation to the work of WPSR. It's a bit of an expensive trip because you have to pay your own airfare and your own lodging, your own food, and we give donations to the people who come and speak to us. And we usually spend 4 or 5 days in the West Bank and meet some of the leaders in the West Bank. One of the people that we love to see is Ronnie Elhanan, who started Family Circle and Parents Circle and Family Forum. And Ronnie and Arab friend have written a book about that experience. And so we meet people that we have great admiration for, who are working to try to make peace.
So do you have a list of people that are interested in going?
I do. Right now, I think there are about 14 people on the list, but not all of them will go. You want to come?
Well, I think I'd like to be on the list. October is a good month for me.
Okay, I'll send you the information. Anybody who wants the information, I have a whole long list of things that might be interesting to you. It's a fabulous trip. It's, again, I don't know, the people in Iraq were lovely to me. The people in Gaza are just so grateful that somebody from the United States comes in to try to help take care of things, or give them encouragement or add to whatever it is that's going on, because it's so easy for the people of the West Bank and Gaza to look at the United States as supporting their pain. And for us to go in and say, we care about you, it matters. And I'm grateful for that.
Has anybody ever gone over there and not come back for whatever reason?
No, but on many people have gone over and wanted to go back and gone back again and again and again. I sincerely thank you for letting me be with you this evening. I'm really, really grateful to be able to talk with you. And if you have questions, my email is iggydog@aol.com. Ignatius was the hospice dog for Evergreen. I would be happy to be in touch with you.
So we got the video of this and we'll put it on our YouTube channel in a couple days.
Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility is the Washington chapter of the National Physicians for Social Responsibility based in Washington, D.C., and National PSR, the U.S. chapter that is a member of International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. So we came into existence on the basis of being against nuclear war. And in fact, the first time we went to Israel, we went hoping to get information about Israel's nuclear plant, which is at Dimona. And we were able to meet the fellow and become friends with a fellow who was the nuclear whistleblower that told the world about that nuclear plant. I guess late 2018 or 19, they were beginning to expand Dimona, but I don't have an update as of today, but there is that nuclear threat in Israel at Dimona. The book is Can We Talk About Israel by Daniel Sokatch. And Dan is from the United States, spent a good deal of time in Israel, and is the head of the New Israel Fund. And there are a lot of Israeli agencies, including Geisha, that are part, and I think maybe Jewish Voice for Peace, who are part of the New Israel Fund. Confessing about this, it's the first time I've ever been reading a history book and had tears running down my face.
So did PSR get the Nobel Prize a while ago?
IPPNW did.
Okay,
Yeah.
one more thing. What's IPPW or whatever, who won the Nobel Prize or something?
The International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for letting me talk with you. I had pages more of stuff to say, so.
A bit different than our usual monthly meeting, which focuses on single payer and so on, but I think it's a really great change of path for at least a month to learn something, and I learned a lot tonight. All right, so should we count down to the end of the meeting? Thanks so much again, Gerri.
Very interesting. Learned a lot in October.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Yeah, see you in October.
It's a deal. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.